With intense fighting in South Gaza, an area once known for its safe zones, concerns are growing over possible attacks on these humanitarian zones. Meanwhile, Gaza's health ministry says more than 300 Palestinians were killed in a single day. North Korea is using South Korean facilities in the Kaesong industrial complex without permission and has cleared away debris from the Inter-Korean Joint Liaison Office building, which it blew up in 2020. We take a look at what are its intentions. South Korea's current accounts remain in positive territory for the 6th month in a row in October, as exports are back on an upward trend for the first time in more than a year. It's December 8th, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start with the intense Middle East war. Along with the continuous offensive happening in Southern Gaza, humanitarian concerns are rising about attacks on so-called safe zones in the region. Gaza's health ministry, run by Hamas, says 350 were killed in the past 24 hours due to intense Israeli bombardments. Park Go-nu starts us off.
3 days after Israel expanded its military offensive to Khan Yunis, the largest city in southern Gaza, concerns about possible attacks on the humanitarian zone in South Gaza are now rising. Those concerns come after the Israeli military posted videos, maps, and satellite photos on Thursday local time, saying 14 rockets have been fired toward Israel from several locations in southern Gaza, including Al-Mawasi, where civilians are seeking shelter. The Israel Defense Forces said Hamas militants abused the people of Gaza, utilizing them for its acts of terror from safe zones. The IDF has encouraged civilians to relocate to areas such as Al-Mawasi, one of the few places left to seek safety, producing videos and releasing maps of the area in both Arabic and English since the early days of the war. But an Israeli military spokesman said he could not speak about future operations, and it is not clear yet whether Israel would designate the safe zones as legitimate military targets, as they did previously, portraying the Al-Shifa hospital in northern Gaza as a Hamas command and control center before occupying it. The official added, civilians of Gaza were being updated frequently in various ways about Israeli military activities. According to Gaza's health ministry, around 350 Palestinians were killed in IDF attacks, with another 1,900 injured on Thursday alone. It added, the cumulative death toll since the start of the armed conflict on October 7th has surpassed 17,100, with 46,000 injured, mostly women and children. Meanwhile, after a guided missile attack by Hezbollah killed a 60-year-old man in northern Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sent a stern warning to the terrorist group.
If Hezbollah chooses to start an all-out war, then it will, by its own hand, turn Beirut and southern Lebanon, not far from here, into Gaza and Khan Yunis.
Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
Top security advisors of South Korea and Japan have discussed the recent progress made in bilateral relations and reaffirmed a willingness to continue enhancing cooperation in security, economy, and people-to-people exchanges. South Korea's Cho Tae-yong met his Japanese counterpart Takewa Akiba on Friday, as Akiba is visiting Seoul for Saturday's trilateral top security advisors meeting between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. Discussing North Korea's growing threats, they emphasized the need for a joint response, including trilateral efforts with the U.S. to maintain regional and international peace. The meeting is a follow-up on the Camp David summit earlier this year. There have been signs of North Korea using the facilities of South Korean companies in the Kaesong industrial complex without permission. The North is also demolishing the Inter-Korean Joint Liaison Office building that it blew up back in 2020. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jong-sil takes a look at what's behind its intention.
South Korea's Ministry of Unification told reporters on Friday that it has detected signs of unauthorized North Korean movement at the Kaesong industrial complex.
Despite repeated warnings from our government, North Korea continues to use the facilities of South Korean companies in the Kaesong industrial complex without authorization. And recently, it's been demolishing the Inter-Korean Joint Liaison Office building that it blew up in 2020.
The spokesperson added that the North will be held responsible for violating the property rights of South Korea. Back in 2020, Pyongyang released a video of it blowing up the Joint Liaison Office used for talks between the two Koreas as a sign of severing an important means of communication with Seoul. In May of this year, the Unification Ministry announced that North Korea had cleaned up remnants of the explosion. The building was then left unattended, but since the end of November, there have been signs that North Korea has begun demolishing it.
In the grand scheme of things, the demolition shows the current state of inter-Korean relations. On the other hand, the North might have strategic intentions to put pressure on the South Korean government.
There were also signs of unauthorized usage of around 30 facilities of South Korean companies at the Kaesong Industrial Complex. This is 3 times the amount that the ministry announced in May.
Kaesong Industrial Complex is one of the very good candidates to bring some kind of economic achievement for the North Korea. So that's why at this moment, North Korea is trying to use the South Korean assets in the Kaesong Industrial Complex.
However, South Korean officials did not pinpoint which companies the facilities belong to. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
The heads of the world's top 2 oil exporters, Saudi Arabia and Russia, spoke with one voice on the need to cut crude output. This comes following a face-to-face meeting on Wednesday between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman during Putin's rare one-day trip to the Middle East. They issued a joint statement that calls all OPEC Plus members to join the oil cuts to stabilize the market for the good of the global economy. The meeting comes after a drop in oil prices despite the OPEC Plus powers vowing for a further output cut. The Kremlin said the two also discussed the fighting in Gaza, Ukraine, and Yemen, and the Iranian nuclear program. On the trade front, South Korea's current account remained in positive territory for the 6th month in a row in October. This as exports were back on an upward trend for the first time in more than a year. Moon Hye-ryun with the details.
South Korea's current account has logged a surplus yet again on the back of improving performance in exports and a decline in imports. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday showed a current account balance of $6.8 billion in October. This is the 6th month in a row for a surplus to be recorded and is also the highest so far this year. The goods account tracking imports and exports experienced a surplus for the 7th straight month as auto exports rose and imports of raw materials fell. Data show that auto exports rose by 21% compared to the same month last year, whereas inbound shipments of gas fell by over 54% and coal by 26%. It's the first time since August 2022 that the country has seen an on-year rise in export value, rising by 7.6% compared to October last year. When comparing the goods balance between January and October this year and last year, this year's export value was lower. But as the import value was also lower, the overall goods balance for the period was higher this year. However, the services balance, which includes earnings and spending on overseas trips and transport, recorded a deficit of $1.25 billion. The travel and transportation sectors showed significant declines on year, with the latter falling from a $1 billion surplus to a $300 million deficit this October. So far this year, the services balance logged a deficit of over $20 billion, which is a sharp decline compared to the same period in 2022, when a deficit of just over $3 billion was recorded. Increased outbound travel as a result of eased COVID-19 restrictions has led to a continued travel balance deficit, but the decline is slowing.
The trade balance deficit has decreased with more tourists from Southeast Asia and Japan.
Meanwhile, the primary account balance responsible for monitoring foreign workers' wages and overseas dividend payments reported a surplus of nearly $3 billion, further contributing to the overall current account surplus. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
As the regular National Assembly session concludes on December 9th, the nation's main rival political parties have agreed to hold a 30-day extraordinary session starting next Monday. 3 plenary sessions will be held on December 20th and 28th, as well as January 9th. The session is on the 20th aims to finalize next year's budget as lawmakers fail to meet the December 2nd deadline. 2 other sessions on the 28th and January 9th will focus on processing bills related to people's livelihoods. During the last regular National Assembly plenary session today, lawmakers passed a confirmation motion for the top court's Chief Justice nominee Cho Hee-dae, ending a 2-month-long vacancy. In the meantime, 4 contentious bills, including a pro-labor bill which President Yoon vetoed last week, were also put to a revote and all were voted down. Our National Assembly correspondent Shin Se-byuk explains.
The National Assembly has approved the appointment of Cho Hee-dae as the next Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. In the last regular plenary session of the Assembly on Friday, attended by 292 lawmakers, a confirmation hearing report on Cho was passed by 264 voted to 18, with 10 abstentions. This came 2 months after lawmakers rejected the previous nominee Lee Gyun-yong, the first such rejection in 35 years. Meanwhile, 4 contentious bills were put for a revote following President Yoon Suk-yeol's veto of them last Friday, of which all were voted down. These bills include the pro-labor Yellow Envelope Bill and 3 revisions to broadcasting laws. To override a presidential veto, a 2/3 majority from a plenary session with more than half of all lawmakers in attendance is needed. The ruling People Power Party said the proposed labor bill violates legal principles, while the main opposition Democratic Party claimed the proposed law guarantees workers' rights.
The proposed labor law not only goes against the principles of legal clarity, proportionality, and the no penalty without a law rule, but also violates the principle of equality. It's a law that shakes the foundation of the long-established labor management relationship in our society, only serving to escalate social conflicts.
This bill simply guarantees workers the right to negotiate with their employers to rectify injustices, unfair conditions and an unjust environment. What makes you think the National Assembly has the right to declare that these workers don't have the qualifications for such rights?
As for the revisions to the broadcasting laws, the ruling party stated that these changes would severely undermine fairness and content delivery. In contrast, the Democratic Party, which holds the majority, argued that such amendments were necessary to ensure press freedom. This marks the 3rd time that bills have been scrapped due to President Yoon's exercising his veto right since his inauguration. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
South Korea will launch a pan-governmental task force to address rising concerns about the increasing number of children with respiratory illnesses. At a meeting today, Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency Commissioner Ji Young-mi said that the task force will be responsible for monitoring respiratory diseases and managing medicine supplies and hospital beds. This comes as cases of children infected with Mycoplasma pneumonia, a leading cause of pneumonia, have begun to rise in schools, kindergartens, and daycare centers. However, she cautioned against new pandemic fears as Mycoplasma pneumonia is not a new infectious disease and there are known effective treatments to deal with it. More measures were unveiled today to attract more tourists to the country next year by offering more benefits to visitors. Prime Minister Han Duk-soo led a cabinet meeting on Friday on ways to boost tourism, setting the goal of 20 million tourists visiting South Korea in 2024. Given that 17.5 million people came to the country in 2019, reaching a peak, this would be the highest figures recorded if the goal is met. Foreign nationals from Vietnam, the Philippines, and Indonesia will now be exempt from group electronic visa fees, along with Chinese nationals. The limit for tax-exempt duty-free shopping will also be doubled. And retailers here are going the extra mile to spread the Christmas cheer, hoping the holiday spirit will boost consumption. Our Lee Soo-jin covers their efforts.
Christmas has already arrived in the retail sector as it's using the winter holiday as a last-ditch marketing strategy to boost consumption. South Korea's CCSI, an indicator of how consumers feel about the economy, has been declining since July. And the pessimistic consumer sentiment is being felt by department stores as operating profits of the big three all fell by double digits in the third quarter. To draw consumers, the big three department stores have built replicas of traditional Christmas markets that are bigger than ever. Here in this colossal glass house are more than 20 wooden chalets that sell seasonal beverages and souvenirs reminiscent of Europe's famous Christmas markets. Although it was inspired by Europe, the market also sells popular Korean street foods such as tteokbokki and fish cakes. To maximize holiday season sales, it was open toward the end of November and has already encouraged people to spend money.
Oh, it's so beautiful, it's so cute. I really love it. I'm sure that I'll be back to buy things for sure.
We actually just bought candy apples here and they were even better than what I imagined.
And on weekends, visitors have to wait hours just to get in. It's not just department stores like this one. They've already begun using Christmas as a marketing strategy to boost consumption. Small businesses have also begun to do the same. Inside this traditional market is a cake shop run by a young entrepreneur. In a nod to her store's location, she sells cakes made out of rice cake ingredients instead of flour. She steams the rice cake into a circular shape and is decorated with colorful frosting along with cake toppers that make it look like the cakes that we typically see in bakeries. She says that she started accepting Christmas cake orders early, during the second to last week of November.
Even though this type of cake is usually bought by older people, around Christmas the demand goes up because young people also buy it.
One expert says that all these efforts are likely to pay off.
The Christmas markets and cakes will act as a catalyst of sorts that lead people to purchase items not holiday-related as well.
She added that while consumers this year might not have a large disposable income, these early Christmas marketing campaigns will motivate customers to open up their wallets. 이수진, Arirang News.
It's Friday, and that means it's time for our weekly arts and culture segment. We have our culture correspondent, Song Yujin, in the studio. Happy Friday, Yujin.
Happy Friday, Jungmin.
What do you have for us today?
Well, so Jungmin, as the chilly weather sets in, now's the best time of the year to cozy up in our bed or a sofa and catch a good movie or a show. And as we know, the Korean streaming scene is buzzing with options, but we have to get ready for something big because this Tuesday, two local streaming giants, TVing and Wave, signed a deal for a merger. So for this week, here's a sneak peek into how this deal might reshape the Korean content and streaming landscape.
Are we about to witness the birth of Korea's largest streaming service? Local streaming giants TVing and Wave have signed a memorandum of understanding for a merger. CJ ENM's TVing is the second largest domestic streaming platform with 5.1 million monthly active users. SK Square's Wave is fourth with 4.23 million. When combined, their total of more than 9 million expected users would make them the leading domestic streaming service provider. The two rivals coming together was not a surprise. This marks the second merger between local streaming services following TVing's merger with KT's Season last December. Industry experts view this as a strategic move for survival.
With the rise of numerous streaming service brands, not only Netflix but also Disney+, there has been constant discussion about the crisis facing domestic services. The merger between TVing and Wave is seen as a way to secure a competitive edge against industry leader Netflix.
In terms of numbers, the merged platform will fall short of Netflix's 11.3 million monthly active users. However, this could change in the long run.
This is exciting news for consumers because they can access a diverse range of content with a single subscription fee. Wave has programs on terrestrial TV channels, while TVing has been building its lineup with entertainment shows and dramas on TVN. On top of that, each platform has its partnerships with streaming services abroad.
This move could also realize the long-envisioned dream of local streaming services, global expansion. Both companies already have the experience and know-how, with CJ acquiring global production studio Endeavor Content and Wave America acquiring US-based video streaming platform Cocoa.
In the case of Netflix, subscriber numbers tend to peak when it releases an original series. This indicates that without compelling original content, a streaming service won't be able to compete globally. There's anticipation that through the merger, the combined investment capacity could increase, which could lead to more original content from the two platforms.
The two companies are expected to finalize a definitive agreement by the middle of next year to conclude the merger process by the end of 2024.
It is a big deal indeed, and Yujin, some people are looking forward to the merger, but are there any concerns about it?
Well, this merger is actually causing a mix of concern and excitement, especially among content creators. The reason is because, on the one hand, it signals fewer opportunities, because having various platforms to showcase their work for content creators also mean that they can compete and get better deals for the proposal. But on the flip side, mergers like this reduce the stress for creators about securing investment. That's because when platforms face financial struggles or operate in the red, it gets tough for them to invest in content creators. So despite the potential for creators to earn less, this could pave the way for a more stable environment, meaning that we'll get to see content consistently being created on platforms.
So the MOU has been signed. What comes next?
Well, the two companies will now have to go through the so-called due diligence, which is a comprehensive assessment process of the deal in operational, financial, legal, and strategic aspects. The exact merger ratio is yet to be confirmed, but local media reports suggest that CJ is set to become the largest shareholder. They also need approval from their board of directors, a process that took 4 months for the TVING and CJ merger. The deal will also need to get assessment by Korea's Fair Trade Commission, as the shares of two companies combined exceeds 30%.
Our culture correspondent Song Yun, thank you for your report.
Thank you.
The weather feels like March or April, not December. The unseasonably high spells are expected to continue tomorrow. As the temperature rises, the daily temperature differences will be around 15 degrees. Please try to dress up warm in the morning and the evening. The atmosphere on the East Coast will dry up even more. The East and West Coast will have gusty winds of more than 20 meters per second. Please pay special attention to the prevention of large-scale fires. Today, smoke from overseas flew in again, increasing the concentration of ultrafine dust in the west. The air is expected to be murky throughout the weekend in this area. Tomorrow, Seoul and Daegu will start off at 9 degrees Celsius. Daily highs in Seoul will get up to 15, Daegu and Gwangju 19 degrees Celsius. On the weekend, the temperatures will be far higher than usual, so no need to worry about the cold. Rainfall is in the forecast across the country early next week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up next.